Welcome to my house. I have my daughter here, Noam, who's going to help me film all of this. So, we can have it recorded and I'll show you the cooking there. I'm so happy to see all of you here today. That's really awesome. But before I start, I just wanted to get a little bit of your opinion about Indian food. Have you tried, and has anybody tried making Indian food before? Oh, I see people giving me thumbs up. Okay. Awesome, great. So I'm gonna show you not the typical, the butter chicken and the ones that we're used to. I'm gonna show you more what the Indian Jewish community cooks during Passover, because it's very different than I grew up in Israel, so I'm used to like using the kosher for Passover stamped spices and stuff like that. But growing up in India, my mom always told me that it wasn't that easy. We had to kind of use fresh ingredients, and I'm going to show you some ingredients and stuff to cook the curry, to cook the other stuff that we're going to make, the haroset as well. It's different than the haroset that you guys are used to. So we can get going, and then I can talk a little bit more about how we did things differently in India. Okay. Yeah. Corey, good to switch. So going to start with the harasa because it takes more time. So I have some pitted dates here, around 15 to 20. I usually make a bigger batch, but because it's still too early for Passover, I'm going to make a smaller batch and show you how to make our haroset, the Indian style. So these are the dates. I'm just going to put a cup of water in it, and the trick is to cook the dates. The great thing about it is there is no added sugar, no honey. You don't add anything. It's healthy. It's organic. Please use the Majolan dates, because anything else other than that, it doesn't taste good. It's too fibrous, and it doesn't come out that good. I tried it once and not recommended. So the water shouldn't be too, too much. It should just be like almost like covering the dates, and that's about it. And we'll just let them kind of boil. And in the meantime, we'll get going with the chicken curry. So I was talking to you guys about how we used to use all the fresh ingredients in order to make the base for the curry. So here I have cilantro or coriander. I have chilies. I have a ginger root. Sorry, guys, I didn't find the turmeric root that we usually use for this recipe, but that's basically the base of these. I have garlic and tomatoes, and I've already made a paste out of it, so we're going to use this. The consistency needs to be very pasty in order to, work in the recipe. So what we'll do is we'll start with sauteing the onions. I usually don't cook with recipes, so I'm sorry if I'm kind of, not in line with what was in the recipe, but I'll try my best. So I've already pre-cut the onions. And we'll just let that saute. So the trick with Indian cooking is that the onions have to be sauteed well in order to get that good gravy consistency for your food, okay? So we'll let the onions saute. In the meantime, I'll just talk to you a little bit about the haroset. So what I usually do with the haroset is with the paste, you'll see it comes out in a very pasty kind of consistency, which I usually then make like small mason jars for my friends and like present it to them during Passover. I also, what I also do is I make energy bites out of it. So for mornings, I just, use that as a base and add, just grind some nuts and mix it together, make it into energy bites. That could be a great breakfast for Passover as well. And that's about it. It's very simple, very straightforward. You can use it for Passover or not. It's just quick and easy karasa.
Neeli, we have a question about the curry base. You said that cilantro is a very large part of it. If we're not feeling cilantro, is parsley an okay substitute? What's your opinion on that?
If you don't like, I know that people either like cilantro or don't. So if you don't like cilantro, I would suggest not using parsley because it's not the same. So just go with ginger garlic paste, and that should be fine with chilies and tomatoes. So just omit the cilantro totally. Don't replace it with another herb because it's not the same. Okay. And now our onion is kind of getting there. Another trick is to use a little bit of salt so it sautés faster. We'll leave the onions. If you guys have any other questions in the meantime?
We don't have anything in the chat, but if anybody has a question, feel free to unmute.
Neeli, does your Passover curry differ from your everyday curry? Like, do you save this dish for Passover, or do you do something different during the year?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Usually for my day-to-day curry, I'll use tomato paste or tomato sauce or whatever. Again, doesn't eliminate, again, that this is just a traditional thing that we do, and I'm trying to carry it on. But usually I would use like a tomato base or a cream, the coconut cream, which kind of helps the curry to be a little more creamy, if you like. Or I would usually soak some cashews and make paste out of it, and then it kind of gives you that creamy blend without using any kind of dairy products. So that would be my other variations of the curry. The base would be same, we're just using different elements and different ingredients to kind of perk it up a little bit.
Neeli?
Yeah.
It's Anne. My son-in-law Mark did not like coriander either. And so I would substitute for him the parsley, but it always tasted different, but it had the same consistency as when you use coriander. So the consistency stayed the same, but it did not taste exactly the same as when you use coriander.
Right. Yeah. And that's, again, I feel cooking is like, it's like art. Enjoy yourself, do whatever you feel like with it, whatever, your taste buds allow you to do, because I think that's the best way to kind of explore cooking and doing it for your, for your taste buds.
We have a question about kitniot, and do Indian families tend to eat kitniot on Pesach?
Very good question. So it's different than the Sephardic Jews, because what we do is we do eat rice, but we don't eat any other legumes or any kind of beans during Passover. So other than rice, we don't usually eat any other kitniot. That's how we, again, coming from my mom's traditions and stuff like that. I think majority of the Indian Jews don't. But again, and Auntie is here to kind of support me with all those things, because there'll probably be some stuff that I won't be able to answer.
That's great. Thanks, Neeli. We also have a question about any specific Indian traditions for Passover or anything during the Seder that's specifically an Indian culture.
Yeah, so in terms of like the meal on Passover, so we usually have a goat. We usually make goat for Passover. Again, going back to the tradition of, the sacrifice that used to happen, that happened during, with the my grandfather used to do that. They used to put the blood around the door, so that like just symbolizing what happened in Egypt before the Jews kind of left Egypt. So that symbolizes. So that's why like there would usually be a little bit of we would use goat for our meal as a symbolism to what happened in Egypt. So that we usually will have goat, and all the other things are the same, the eggs, and that's all. Like the Passover seder is the same. It's just that our karoset is different as well. But other than that, yeah, it's similar.
Yeah. Neeli, we also use chicken.
We also use chicken. Yes, we also use chicken. So here in Canada, I think it's a little difficult to get goat, and so nowadays we use chicken for our seder. But back in India, it used to be goat.
Mhm.
For the onions that you're using, how many do you use?
I use 2 onions because again, I like it a little more, a little more gravy in my food. So I'll use 2 onions, but you could use 1 depending on, how you prefer it. So the dates are starting to boil. So as soon as the water starts boiling, we'll just reduce the heat to low and let it cook. And the onions are actually turning nice and golden, and we're good to add our green coriander paste to it. My mom actually adds a little bit of mint in it as well. It gives it a refreshing taste, but again, depending on what you prefer doing.
We have a question about where you find kosher for Passover Indian spices like garam masala.
Yep, so I actually have it here in any of our, Sobeys or No Frills or whatever. I have some from Israel, but I have seen them here as well. So I guess this is not kosher for Passover, but these guys are.
Yeah. Yeah. When the Indian Jews went to Israel, they needed certain spices, and gradually those have become very common in Israel, and they are used widely. And now you can get it at Sobeys or any of the food stores up in Thornhill that carry kosher stuff.
Right. So now one important thing about the green masala that I just added, the green paste, it has to be cooked, it has to be sauteed really well, and we have to lose the raw garlic and ginger taste in order to, because if you don't fry it properly, it will have that foul taste when you're having the actual dish. So it takes a little bit of time, but I'll also show you when you would know it's ready, because then the oil kind of starts separating from the mixture. So that's when you know it's ready.
We have a comment from Rochelle saying it's too bad you can't smell through Zoom. I think we all are eager to smell your kitchen right now.
I know, it smells really good. And one other thing I think I do for my kids, because my kids are really picky with their food and stuff. If you don't like the chunkiness of the base, you could always blend it and then add the rest of the stuff. So, if you don't feel like it, and again, go crazy with it, add peppers to it, whatever. Like it doesn't matter. I think for this particular session, because it's so Passover oriented, I wanted to show you guys what the traditional Passover chicken curry would look like in terms of our traditions, but again, it's not limited to this. smells a lot like ginger and garlic. So we need to get rid of that. We need to get rid of that smell before we proceed with our recipe.
Neeli.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Lisa. Is this before you're adding the garam masala and everything else? This is just what you blended in and you're putting it into the onions?
Yes, it's just
Okay.
the green, the fresh spices that we put together and blended it. Once that is done, you should all the dry powders you should add after the fact. Once all of that has been, nicely sauteed and ready to go. The flavors are different when you do that versus, if you add it all together. I feel that the powders tend to lose the aromas, and if you really want it, smelling like Indian food, you should have it later on. So as you can see, the oil is starting to separate from the actual spices and the onions.
How do you get your onions not to burn for being in the pan for so long?
Sorry, I didn't hear that question.
We have a question about onions burning easily, and so how do you, what's your process on how you're able to get them to not burn while they're in the pan?
Well, you have to constantly monitor them. That's the only way, because if you don't, it does burn. So a lot of stirring, I guess. Okay, so as you can see, it's almost ready because the oil is starting to separate. That's really the key for a good recipe. And now we can, start adding our spices, so a little bit of turmeric. And then I have the garam masala. Paprika. Again, I add paprika. It's not on the recipe, but I kind of like it to be a little more reddish in terms of the gravy. So I add that. I add a little more of the salt because the chicken has already been salted, so I'm not going to add too much of it because it should balance out.
Do you like to add smoky or regular paprika?
I add regular. I don't add smoky. And another thing is a little bit of sugar to, believe me, try doing it without, and you'll see the difference. I think the sugar kind of adds that. It releases all the flavors that need to be in this particular recipe. We're ready now to add the chicken. So what I do with the chicken, you'll notice that a lot of Indian recipes, they'll tell you to, marinate the chicken with yogurt, just so that the chicken doesn't dry out. What I usually do is I either marinate it with lemon juice or with vinegar. So, and just let it soak and then add it to the curry. So it remains tender and, doesn't overcook. So I'm just gonna add that. It's washed and marinated. We'll give it a few minutes. I personally don't like it too watery, although we do eat it with rice, but I usually don't add extra water because the chicken, it does release a lot of moisture, so I just leave it at that. But if you feel like you want it a little bit more watery, you can do that. We'll check on it in a little bit. In the meantime, we can look at the karose. Oh.
When you're marinating the chicken, how long do you marinate? How long do you marinate for, and how much lemon juice do you add?
I usually, again, I think I had like around 400 grams of chicken here, or 500, and then I just use 1 lemon juice. That's 1 full lemon. That's good. It also gives it a nice taste, nice tangy taste to it, which, you know, which helps with the recipe actually.
Could you use a different protein like tofu?
Yeah, that's what's good with Indian cooking. You can you know, swipe out the chicken or any kind of meat and you use it with fish, use it with tofu, with paneer. That's like the Indian cottage cheese, and yeah, you can have that as a option as well. I'm gonna add a little bit of water, really teeny tiny bit, not too much, just so that it kind of helps me mix all the spices.
And remind us how long you said you marinated for?
Oh, around 2 hours.
Okay. So it doesn't need to be overnight or anything.
Yeah, no. Sometimes I don't even have 2 hours to marinate it, so I'll just quickly do it for 15-20 minutes. But the longer you keep, the better the taste. So yeah. So I guess our dates are ready. So what we're gonna do, I'm still gonna continue to cook it, but in the meantime, we can blend it.
The chicken you used, was it chicken breast or chicken thigh?
Chicken breast. But you could use chicken thigh. I feel any kind of dark meat makes the dish even yummier. The carousel smells amazing. It smells nice and sweet, and it's ready to go.
Can you make your recipes ahead of time and freeze them?
Is it for the chicken or the carousel?
I'm guessing for the chicken, but Carla, if you want to, yeah, the chicken.
The chicken, I would suggest making the base and then adding the chicken before, you know, just like having this base done and chicken when you're ready to have it. I don't like freezing chicken and stuff that has already been frozen and then, you know, defrosted and stuff, but that's just my preference. So you guys can see the consistency of the carousel. It's nice and pasty. Let it cool down. You can add any kind of nuts, pistachios, walnuts, pecans. It tastes amazing and we're good to go. Sorry, I forgot to add a pinch of salt, but again, it's just, you don't have to, but I think it just adds a little bit of taste to it. And a little, like a teeny tiny bit of lemon.
The nuts that you add, do you have any sort of like roasted, salted, or just plain nuts?
Yeah, just plain nuts, not salted or toasted, just plain nuts. You can, yeah. And look at our chicken. another, I would say 5 minutes, and we're good to go. Do you have any other questions, guys?
We have looks delicious, yummy. What is this? Or any other, Carla, what are you asking? Or any other scented rice? Oh, for the rice that you use, what kind of rice? Is that the question?
Yeah, you could use basmati. That goes well with the dish, but we're into healthy eating now, so we use brown rice. That's fine too.
Rochelle wants to know where you live so she can come by and grab some food.
Please do. We live in East Willenbury, that's just north of Newmarket. So yeah, please, you're always welcome.
Oh yeah, so we did have a question about, yeah, what kind of rice? Let's see, we have, what are some other Indian specialties served for a Seder?
What kind? We make this, we call it patties, but it's basically boiled potatoes that we spice them, and then we make ground beef or chicken, ground chicken, and we kind of, make it like almost like a dumpling, and then fry it, and that's one of the things we make for Passover, again, using matzah, I guess, because we can't use breadcrumbs, so we use matzah crumbs to do that. Again, I kind of have a little bit of influence from Israel too, so we would make schnitzel, but using the matzah crumbs. What else do I make? And Auntie, do you want to?
We would sometimes make something like, the way you make knish. We would make it with potato as the outside, a mashed potato, and fill it with mince. Okay, so you do the mince and with spices, you'd cook it separately, and then you would fill the mashed potato, but you had to make the potato so that it was easy to manipulate to fold over the meat, and then you would fry it. Okay, so that was another thing we did. A lot of the food is your everyday food, except very carefully you did not include anything that was not kosher for Passover.
Yep.
Okay, you had to be very careful. Okay, so for example, in India, the Bnei Israel did not have sugar or tea. They would not use it during Passover because it could be contaminated. Mm-hmm. So they would use, something to substitute. They would eat dates to substitute for the sweetness, just plain dates. And they would use, they would buy coffee beans and grind them at home. Okay, so that it's not contaminated with anything else.
Great, thank you. We have a question here about, do you have 2 Seders in India?
Yes, we did.
Yes, we do. 2 Seders, for sure. Mm-hmm. And on the haroset that Neeli made, some families would use ground walnuts. Okay, like you'd grind the walnuts and then you would sprinkle it on top when you're serving it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I usually don't add nuts to it because I usually give it out as gifts to my friends and family. So I prefer, because of the nut allergies and stuff, I try to stay away from that. But at home, yeah, once we're ready to go before Passover, like we'll have nuts and stuff added to it. And just adding to Ann Auntie's comment earlier, I know my mom used to tell me that they wouldn't even have milk during Passover in India because, again, thinking that there was a lot of if there was a mix, like they mixed say flour with water because they wanted to have like a so that they wanted to stay away from any kind of chametz that they could think about.
Yeah. They would even buy rice, like raw rice, and they would grind the rice at home. They had special grinding machines, like the 2 stones, and in between the old-fashioned ones. And they would even grind the rice at home and use the rice to make what we call chapatis, right? Normally you make it out of wheat. They would make it out of rice during Passover.
Yeah. So if we think, and I was speaking to Fleur the other day, I was telling her how anxious I get when Passover is around the corner, because we need cooking and cleaning and all that. So you can only imagine how daunting it was for, you know, our families back in India, because they had to do all these additional things that thankfully we don't need to right now. So yeah.
Even the matzah, I mean, when I was growing up in India, we never got matzah at the grocery store the way you get it now. It comes from Israel and made in the States. We never got all of that. So our matzah was made locally. In the Magen David synagogue, they would build these big ovens only for Passover, and they would bake the matzah, and it came out like shmura matzah. And every family placed their order for how many matzah you required for the week of Passover. And you better get it right, because if you ran short, nobody would give you any.
Yeah.
And then they would bake it and put it into these huge baskets lined with fresh cotton fabric, white cotton fabric. And they would put the matzahs very gently, one on top of the other, to fill the basket. And they would send that, the porter would carry it to your place. Okay, and that's what you used. And that matzah was, you know what shmura matzah is like, it just breaks so easily. So you have to be very, very careful, you know, especially for Seder night when you need the 3 matzahs, you know, you didn't want broken matzahs.
Wow. We do have a question about the nuts that you add into your charoset. Do you mix them in, or do you just use them for garnish?
You can do anything. Yeah, whatever, doesn't matter, your preference.
Yeah.
Okay, I think our chicken curry is ready.
Mm-hmm.
What I do is I garnish it with a little bit of coriander. Again, I know you guys are not, a lot of people are not fans of coriander, but I think it just adds nice taste to it. But again, doesn't have to be. And again, you can serve it with the rice. Again, for Passover, I guess. If you guys wanted it a little bit less gravy, you can just, you know, wait for it to evaporate, and you could use it. You can have it in matzah as well. And that's that. Did you guys have any other questions for me?
Feel free to unmute if anybody wants to ask a question verbally, or in the chat as well, of course.
What kind of things might you have for desserts? Oh, Francis, you asked the same question in the chat.
What do we have for desserts? I think we usually only have fruits. We don't like in my mom's house, we don't have any other dessert, just fruits usually.
That's true. That is really all we had available that we could use for Passover.
Yeah. So we kind of continue with our tradition. I know nowadays there are like different kind of cakes and cookies and stuff that's, you know, very Passover friendly, but I think for me at least, I want my kids to know that, you know, that's not an option. You just have to like follow the tradition. Hopefully, you know, they continue on.
We have a question about the charoset. Adele or Marvin, who asked that. I'm not exactly sure what the question is. If you want to unmute or clarify on the chat.
Yeah, the dates. You've made the dates. What do you add to the dates?
Just water, nothing else, and a little bit of salt and a squeeze of lemon juice. That's it.
And so what you've made is all you put in it. That's it.
That is it. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And it's simple. It's healthy. You know, no sugar, no honey. I think that's basically why. And it tastes amazing.
We have a question about where most of the Jews live in India.
Well, now there are, well, most of the Jews are in Israel. The Indian Jews have kind of immigrated to Israel. But when I was growing up there, they like a majority of them were based in Mumbai. And then there were some in Cochin, and I know Ann Auntie can give you a bigger, better explanation of how it works. So take it on, Auntie.
Okay. The Bombay had the largest community. There were some in Pune, which is a hill station near Bombay. And there were some in the Cochin community was separate, and they were a fairly large community. And a few in Delhi, and a few in a city called Ahmedabad. But that was basically it. There were some Jews in Karachi before partition took place, before India was divided into India and Pakistan. There was a vibrant Jewish community in Karachi, Pakistan, which is now Pakistan, and they all had to leave in 47. Okay, so that is gone. So today the population of the Jews in India was very small compared to the general population. The largest it ever was during the Second World War, and it was only maximum 29,000, not even 30,000, okay? And today there are less than 5,000 left, maybe even 4,000 with the dwindling numbers, and majority in Bombay.
How were the Jews treated in India? Was there a lot of anti-Semitism, general acceptance?
No, there was no anti-Semitism ever in India. We were treated very well. We were, from the very beginning, allowed to own land, allowed to open businesses, open to our schools or any schools we wanted to go to, any educational institution you wanted to go to, any business, any jobs, professions. There was absolutely no restriction. You could join the armed forces, and we had some, very good Jewish men, particularly in those days, who rose to the very top in the Navy and the Army. Okay, so they served in the Indian Army and the Indian Navy too. So it was, in that respect, we never experienced anti-Semitism, didn't even know what it was until after we left India.
We have a really nice comment from Anna saying during both World War I, her uncle and World War II, her uncle and her brother were both in India and went to shuls on Friday night and always went home to somebody's house for Shabbat.
Yeah, in Bombay, a lot of the Jewish communities invited the soldiers to come for Shabbat dinner. Yes, the Jewish soldiers did come. And it's strange because after all those years, when we came to Canada, I met one that we had known in India for Shabbat, and he lived in Winnipeg with his family.
Gosh, a question. Why did so many of the Indians, Jewish Indians, leave India and go on to Israel? What just, do they want to be in Israel, or did things all of a sudden start getting worse?
No, things didn't really get worse. The primary reason for people to leave was we always were a guest people in India, even though we were so well treated and welcomed, but we were always a guest people. And the idea was always that one day we would all end up in Jerusalem. At the end of Passover, you say next year in Jerusalem. So they were going home. So when Israel was formed, was established, they sent representatives from Israel to India to entice the young people to come, to make Aliyah to Israel. They needed young people. And so they came to India and they actively sought out the young people and convinced them to come to Israel to help build Israel. And that's why all the young people went first. And it was only later that the parents decided, what are we doing here? All the kids have gone. And we are left alone here. So they decided that they would go to Israel too. one of the other reasons that people left India is that after independence, some of the provinces there became very sort of nationalistic. So it was something like, Quebec for Quebecois, that kind of attitude. So in Maharashtra, where Bombay is located, the Maharashtrians began to feel that Maharashtra is for the Maharashtrians and you must speak Marathi, just as in Quebec, you have to speak French. You understand? It was that kind of attitude. It wasn't an anti-Semitic attitude. It was just an attitude that developed. And a lot of and when I was teaching there, when I first got married, and the government started to talk about doing away with English as a first language, and that was not acceptable to us. Because if you do away with English and learn only Indian languages, which are spoken nowhere else in the world, it's no good. I mean, in the end, they didn't do that, but they were definitely considering it. And so at that point, like Sol and I thought, no, we don't want to raise a family here, we're gone. Okay, so families had different reasons for leaving, but primarily it was the kids who went first, and then the families just followed.
And in Israel, were the Indian Jews accepted, or?
No.
That's what I thought.
No. The first group of Bnei Israels who went to Israel actually came back to India because they were so badly treated there. And that carried on for a very long time. Primarily, it was color, but then the rabbinate had to find a reason, and the reason they found is that you hadn't followed Chalisa. Now, the Bnei Israel had been cut off from the mainstream of Jewry thousands of years ago, dating back to, just after the first temple, before the second temple. Some say they came right after the second temple, but whatever, they were cut off from the mainstream of Jewry for so many years. They were not aware of many of the holidays that were added to the Jewish calendar, and they were not aware of many of the rules and regulations that came in. So for example, they were not aware that if a Jewish woman marries a non-Jewish man, her children are still Jewish. According to them, if you were a male or a female and you married outside the community, you were dead. They tore their clothes, sat shiver, and that was the end of that. And you were not allowed to be buried in the Jewish cemetery. You were not allowed to come into their home, nothing. So it was that kind of attitude. And they didn't practice Chalisa. And I'm assuming most of you know what Chalisa is, right? No? Okay. Well, it is when a man dies and his wife is left a widow when she has never conceived or had a child and never really conceived, not even a miscarriage. Then her husband's brother has to marry her or give her a get, right? Give her a divorce. And they didn't practice that. But among the Bnei Israel and in Indian society, if a young girl lost her husband very early, she was considered unlucky. It was a superstition. She was considered unlucky, and that rubbed off on the Bnei Israel so that they themselves did not want that, and nobody wanted to marry that girl because she was considered unlucky. So she was looked after by her husband's family all her life, but she never ever remarried. So that was the way they did things. But the rabbinate decided, well, you didn't practice Chalisa, so therefore you're not really Jewish. It was the only reason they could find. And it took many, many years for the Bnei Israel to fight with the Israeli government and with the rabbinate to get that removed. Okay, and when it was finally removed, there were a lot of Orthodox Ashkenazi rabbis who would not marry an Indian girl or boy to an Ashkenazi girl or boy. They wouldn't even perform the wedding. So they were very, very badly treated. And as I'm sure Neeli can tell you, the way she was treated when she was in Israel, and that's only more recently.
Yeah. Yeah, when I was getting married, and I wasn't even marrying an Ashkenazi guy, I was marrying an Indian guy, and I still had to prove that I was Jewish, that my mom was Jewish. We had to bring the ketubah to Jerusalem. We had to get 2 or 3 people who knew my mom's family and my dad's family to come and kind of like, vouch for us that we are Jewish. So yeah, it was, yeah, and it didn't mind, like it didn't care. Like I was like, but I went to the army. I served for this country, and they go, we don't care. You have to still prove that you're Jewish. So it was fairly recent.
But isn't that's for almost anybody? Like my niece got married in Israel a couple summers ago. She also had to prove that she was Jewish and her parents were Jewish. Rabbi Schein got different rabbis in Toronto who know our family to write letters, plus he wrote letters. So even though, she wasn't, she's born in Canada, she also needed that because she was marrying an Israeli. And there was a whole issue about it. And that's why I think a lot of Canadians or a lot of Israelis don't get married in Israel for that reason, because they make such productions.
Yeah, they go to Europe.
Or to, somewhere.
Yeah. We do have a question about the Indian Jewish community in Canada and in Toronto, and how big it is and what that looks like.
The Indian Jewish community in Toronto is not very big. Okay, it's fairly small. Years ago and those of you who heard Flo and Neeli speak at the racism event that you all had at Beth David, you know how badly Flo was treated as a child, both my kids as a child, as when they were attending Associated, and even at the synagogue we joined before we joined Beth David. The community, we were very few families together. And one of the families who actually joined Beth David later, I don't know if any of you, Stephen or Adele, if any of you remember Elijah and Jerusha Hyams. Do you remember them?
Yeah.
The Hyams, Faye, do you remember
I do. I was very good friends with Miriam.
Yes, okay. So Miriam's eldest brother was at York University, and he suddenly died of hepatitis.
Yes.
And when he died of hepatitis, my husband Solomon and a friend of theirs, who was a Jewish Ashkenazi Jew, the two men went running from one organization to another asking for a burial plot, because we were new immigrants and none of us had enough money to join a shul or to join any organization. So they went running from one organization to another, begging for a burial plot for this boy. And no one would give us a burial plot. Every organization they went to that day said, how do we know you're Jewish? Sorry, we can't give you a plot. And in the end, it was towards evening that the Ashkenazi gentleman that was with Saul, he said, that was Goldie Isaacs. Do you remember Goldie Isaacs, Faye?
No.
Goldie's husband had gone with Saul. And they went, he suggested, let's go to the Lubavitchers, the Chabad, right? And they went there. That was the last place they could try. They went there, and believe me, they gave a plot without blinking an eye, without asking any questions. It's the only reason we were able to bury that boy have a Jewish burial for that boy.
I want to tell you that I was very good friends with Miriam, spent many Shabbases with them, and Yerusha, her mother, Alei Shalom, amazing woman, taught me Indian cooking and her chapatis and her curries. And I have to tell you, it's I always used to think that, my mother was a great cook, but I always thought there's something very special about your cooking, and it's always influenced me, and it's just lovely. And she was a wonderful woman. She was amazing.
She was. And that's why, because of the way our kids were treated and the way we were treated, that Elijah and his wife Ersha and Saul and I got together, and we got a couple of other Indian Jewish families to join us, and we decided to start Congregation Bina and to hold our own high holiday services. And we rented Council House and started with 5 families. Okay. And today we have about 120 members. We had more, but a lot of the members who came from Israel suddenly decided, that they wanted to be more orthodox, and we would allow men and women to sit together if they wished, and they wanted to have a machitza and sit separately, and all of that. So there has been a little bit of leaving from Congregation Bina because they've decided to be orthodox and to have somewhere where they can walk. Council House was too far. So yeah, but Bina has been around for over 40 years now. We have had our own high holiday services, even though I've been a member of Beth David for over 30 years now, Faye. I've never come for high holiday services except once in a while. For maybe the next day of Rosh Hashanah, right, Steve?
Okay. That's just something on the food issue.
Mhm.
I always find that Indian food here, I'm not sure it was like that in India, is very dairy oriented. And I don't.
No, Indian food is very dairy oriented if you're eating food cooked by the Gujaratis or the Punjabis from the Punjab in the north, and you're eating that food. It's not the Indian Jewish cooking. No, we never mixed meat and milk or any dairy in our food.
Right.
But if you go to an Indian restaurant, yes, they do serve you food that is mixed with dairy a lot.
And because of those restrictions, I think the Indian Jews have come up with like substitutes, like, instead of using yogurt, we use stuff like lemon juice to kind of tenderize the meat, or we use coconut cream to give you that creamy texture to your food. Yeah. So very, very kosher in that terms.
Yeah, and we had to do that.
Right.
We're ready to plan an Indian Kiddush when we're all back in shul. Madeline's going to plan it.
Great.
Yes? Oh, good.
Awesome.
You were talking about a dessert for Passover. The Kochini Jews would take the matzah and they would make what they called a Kochini appam, like a bread. But it's not a bread. It's more, to me, it's more like a pudding, But it's like making bread pudding, so to speak. But they made it with matzah that was broken and moistened in a bit of water with lots of eggs and brown sugar and the haroset with some oil and cardamom powder and grated coconut, or just coconut with, and then they would add raisins and small walnut pieces. And they would mix it all together. There's a recipe for it, and you can mix it all together and you can bake it. Okay, and it comes out like bread pudding, but it's made with matzah.
Well, okay. Thank you so much. If nobody has any other questions, thank you so much, Neeli, and Anne as well, for sharing all of the history and wonderful information and culture of the Indian Jewish culture in India and Israel here. I think we all really, really enjoyed hearing about it. And Neeli, thank you for sharing your recipes. I see Anna really wants to ask something.
Someone I knew had a theory that Indian Jews were one of the lost tribes. Any comment?
Well, some historians do believe that, Anna. They believe, I mean, when the traveler from Cochin coming up north came across the Bnei Israel, he thought they were one of the lost tribes when he saw that they had all the practices of Judaism, and they only knew the Shema, the first line of the Shema, and nothing else. And they had no prayer books, and they had nothing. It was just the Shema. Their Sabbath was on a Saturday. They circumcised a boy on the 8th day. They didn't mix milk and meat. They only ate kosher fish. He even tested them with non-kosher fish mixed with kosher fish, and they separated it, Anna, and said, we won't cook this, but we will cook this for you. And every time he asked them, why do you do this? They didn't know. They had no idea why they did certain things. And as Neeli pointed out, for Passover, they did celebrate Passover, and they would take the blood of the animal and put it on the doorposts of their homes. They had customs and traditions that were from ancient temple times. Okay, and so he thought they were one of the lost tribes. So whether they are or aren't, I don't know. They believe they are from the tribe of Asher and Zebulun. Okay, so the two tribes.
Anne, could we get your recipe for that pudding? That sounded delicious.
I can send it to somebody. Who can I send it to? Faye?
Yeah, to Cora, to me.
Cora?
Yes,
All
please.
right. Is your email somewhere, Cora? I don't have it.
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat for you, or I'll email you.
Email me.
Yeah.
It's just my name. Faye has it at Rogers.com.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you. And I'm sure if we have any more questions, I can email Neeli or Anne if that's okay with either of you. So thank you so much. And
Before we leave, sorry, I just wanted to thank Anne, Auntie, for joining and for your support. I love you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Neeli. Anytime.
Thank you all for joining. Sorry, Cora, I didn't mean to cut